So now that we know how to select elements, and we can use different ways to select them, we can select by an ID, a class name, or even the actual tag names, or use this universal query selector all, and kind of just drop whatever we want in there, class name, tag name, ID, right? We can just put CSS selectors in there and select particular elements in our actual document. So now that we know how to do that, that's all well and good. What about actually changing things, adding these interactions? Okay, so first of all, let's talk about changing things. Before we react to things like mouse clicks and keyboard strikes and all kinds of other events, let's just talk about making some changes in the JavaScript. So a lot of times what you'll see is you can change the CSS with JavaScript. You can change the look of something with JavaScript. And you could technically do something like this. Let's select the H1, okay? And let's just do this. Let's say document.getElement by ID, and we'll target that H1 up there. Okay, so, sorry, and we need to put the actual ID name. No pound sign, just the actual ID. So if I save that, nothing will happen here. Except that we, in the JavaScript, have targeted this particular element. Now let's store that in a variable. We'll just say var h. So now h is equal to this. Okay. Now what we can do is we can say h dot style dot font size, and we can set it to 100 pixels. So we've demonstrated something like this before. So I could change the actual CSS with JavaScript, but that's not a good idea. You want to create some separation. You want your JavaScript to do very JavaScript-y things, and you want your CSS to handle the colors and the font size and whatever else, positioning, the things that CSS excels at. So just so you know, however, there are many things you can do. You can do the font size, you can change the background color, and again, use this site as a reference. And if you go over to their style reference here for HTML DOM objects, you can see all the things you can do. So these look like CSS properties, except notice that they're camel case. Okay, so typically in CSS, your font size attribute is changed like that. But in camel case, they just kind of run into each other, no hyphen, and make sure you capitalize the second or more words. So you can do things like border. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, it's a lot of the CSS things we can do with JavaScript. But now, typically, you don't do that. You don't want to mix the CSS. So how would I affect the CSS with JavaScript? Well, you could do something like this. You could have a separate CSS document, or in this case, we'll just put it in here. And we'll say, okay, let's give anything that has, let's make up a new class name, like red text, okay? And in here we'll say color red. Okay, so we've got this class, but nothing in the document has it. Now, we could add it with JavaScript, and what we can do is something like this. We can say, we've selected this H1, and we're going to add the class, this class, and those features with JavaScript. Okay, so let's go back here. Right now it just looks as it did. Okay, so now if I go back here and I say, okay, now let's add a class name. First, the way we can do that is say class name. Let's get the class name. Okay, and let's set it equal to its class name, whatever's there. Right now there is no class there, but we'll just say set it equal to that plus, and we're just doing string concatenation here, space red text. Okay, so what's going to happen here is it's going to check and see, are there any classes in this particular element? In this case, there isn't, but if there were, it would be like this, and let's, some class would be in here. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going in and reaching in to see if there's a class. We just added one. So now we're just replacing it with the same class that was there, so we don't get rid of it, and then adding this red text. So let's just see what happens. If I refresh, you'll see it turned red. So let that sink in. A lot was kind of going on here. All we're doing is this special method .className allows us to retrieve whatever classes are inside this particular element. This is, sorry, not a method, but a property. So if I go in here and I inspect element and I say, okay, we've selected the H1, right, and we called it H. It has a property called className. Okay, and it'll spit out whatever classes are there. So if there was nothing there, the way we had it, for example, okay, and I'll just comment this out for now. There's the H, and then if I do H className, there's nothing there, okay? But now, if there were something there, I wanted to show you what it looked like if there were something there. Okay, if there is a class name, it's the safest way to add a class to this is by saying, okay, let's set the class to whatever is there and then add red text. But you want a space so that they don't run into each other, because if we did it like that, and we say, refresh the page, H class name, they'll run into each other, and we don't have a class like that defined in our CSS. But we do have a class just red text, not some class red text. We have red text on its own. So if we want to add this CSS with JavaScript, the easiest way to do it is like that. If I refresh the page, you'll see it turns red. Okay, so again, play with that, let that sink in if you're not quite following what I'm doing here. All I'm doing is just adding in another class, and you could imagine that it's basically just dropping it in like that. And now anything with red text will be colored red as we defined in our CSS. So all I was trying to demonstrate is that that is a way of adding something to, you know, your document without writing actual CSS down here. We're just adding a class name. That's a cleaner way to do it. The CSS is defined here, and we're not doing something like h.style.font size right down here, because that's a little bit more convoluted. You might think that it was easier to write that down here, just the CSS in the JavaScript, but the fact is, by separating it, you're going to have cleaner code, and as your applications get larger, you'll see why that's very important. So typically it's a big no-no to actually have your CSS down here in the JavaScript. So don't worry if you didn't quite memorize this or understand this right off the bat. We're going to look at much easier ways to do this down the line, but just keep in mind that that's a cleaner way to add CSS to an element.